you, because I just don't find myself distinguished or exceptional. I'm just, as they say, as someone who say, yo soy un hombre cora del pueblo. But anyway, I'm going to do my task. It was requested to me by ICST, because we need to know some things about our identity as an order. And I would like to start this sharing or this presentation with my experience during my, I guess, my first month in Pamplona, in Navarra, because I was exchanging stories with my fellow students from the Philippines who were specializing also in church history. And we were talking about our respective seminaries. And we were talking about the year of foundation of these seminaries. And I found out that most of the conciliar seminaries during the colonial period in the Philippines were all founded in the 1700s. And they asked me, how about you in Vigan? What was the year of your foundation? We were founded in 1822. And they asked me, why that late? When was your diocese, when was Nueva Segovia founded? 1595. When was Nueva Segovia transferred to Vigan? 1758. And why only 1822? It seems there was no interest in forming the indios for the indios in your region. That was one of the comments of my comrades. At the end of my studies, Father Lyra told me, Ericson, before coming home, please bring some materials coming from the archives of Sevilla, from the Patronato Real, so that we can prepare a kind of documentation on the evangelization of Ilocos Norte in time for our Golden Jubilee. Well, 2011 is the Golden Jubilee in the Diocese of YEPES. And while I was browsing in the online catalog, I searched for the keyword Nueva Segovia de Vigan. Because for your information, we have two Nueva Segovias in the world. Nueva Segovia in the Philippines and Nueva Segovia in Nicaragua. So I have to say Nueva Segovia de Filipinas or Nueva Segovia de Vigan. And among the files that came out is the document entitled La Fundación o La Fundación de un Seminario en Villa Fernandina de Vigan. And I asked for that expediente. It's actually a compilation of manuscripts, parchments, almost brown in color, with of course written by the people of the time. Then while reading the document, it's actually a document on the petition for the erection of a seminary in the would-be and the future seat of the diocese in Vigan by no other than the very bishop who petitioned for the transfer of Nueva Segovia from Blanco to Vigan in 1756. So I told myself, if that's the case, if we were founded in 1822, the intention did not begin on that year. It has been there many decades before its foundation. So I got interested in getting that document, and I had to ask to be placed into a PDF. And I just received the CD 2 months ago. And when they told me about this topic, Father, we are celebrating the Silver Jubilee of the Diocesan Clergy Administration, I was very hesitant in accepting the job because who am I to be talking of the 25 years? Of the 25 years, I only witnessed 5 years. So I am not an authority. And I told him, no, don't worry, Father Danny will be with you. So I had to go to Apo Danny, Apo, how shall we present this? And I told him, I found this old document on the Vigan Seminary, and we agreed at this point. He will be talking about the fruits of the 25 years of the Diocesan Clergy Administration, while I'll be talking on the tree, the root, the trunk, the branches that led to the fruit, in which we ourselves are these fruits. So allow me to start my presentation, brothers and sisters. The history of the diocesan clergy is always linked to the history of the diocesan seminary. It can be assumed that there could be no diocesan clergy without the conciliar seminary. Well, for your information, during those times, the diocesan seminary was called conciliar seminary because it's a conciliar fruit of Trent. It was a response to Trent. And it's vice versa. There could be no diocesan clergy without a diocesan seminary. There could be no diocesan seminary without the diocesan clergy. For both were linked as the womb to the baby. As manifested in its etymology seminarium, the seminary means seatbed for the diocesan priests. Looking at the members of the diocesan presbyteria in northern Luzon, we can always trace the footprints of their formation in a minor, college, or theological seminary of the diocese. I believe this is what drives us to come back to the seminary every time there is INNILIW. We come to relieve, reminisce, and retrace our respective tugot or footprints. Well, by the way, speaking of reminisce the tugot, during my first week in ICST, while I was moving around the building, as if the walls would talk. So I was telling myself, well, it's like the wall telling me, do you remember at this point, it was like this. In that place, it was like that. In this room, something happened like this. So as if the walls could talk. It's always bringing us back to our tugot in ICST. And to celebrate our especially to the womb, where our priestly formation was nurtured. The 25 years of the diocesan clergy administration of the regional theology is an appropriate time to retrace the history of the Filipino diocesan clergy and the beginning of the conciliar seminary of Vigan. This is not to show different chronicle of the history of the venerable seminary, but to expose a significant detail of its foundation and of our past as an order. The beginning of the native diocesan clergy working in the vineyard of northern Luzon. I hope this will arouse in us the interest and an appreciation of our identity. These beginnings were not easy, for they stood against the colonial current of the times. Some key personalities of the era would later see reasons to establish the native clergy. Someone would see it important to open the priestly order to natives, for who else could explain the gospel as well as their fellow natives, who knew the land and the people well. Others would opine during the time that to lessen the expense of importing Spanish friars from Spain and the Americas, the native diocesan priest would take over the reins of the parishes. Another would say, it is better to develop the secular clergy, for they would never challenge the Spanish patronato, which the friars would always do. Although always hindered by legal obstacles from the insular leadership, some archbishops of Manila attempted to open the doors of the diocesan priesthood. Among them, I would like to name one, is Fray Pedro Martinez de Arifala. He was a Franciscan who had a close worker, one of his diocesan priests. Actually, he was his backbone, by the name Don Juan de la FUENTE YEPES, who will later on become Bishop of Nueva Segovia. YEPES was a prominent figure in the Cathedral chapter of Manila and was among those who experienced the discriminatory attitude towards insulares. When we say insulares, these are the Spaniards, full-blooded Spaniards who were born in the islands. They were also called Filipinos. For your information, when you say Filipino during the time, it would refer to Spaniards born in the islands. We were the Indios. There were Chinese mestizos and Spanish mestizos. Spanish and Chinese mestizos and Indios were discriminated for joining the priestly order. YEPES worked with Archbishop Martinez de Arifala in the recruitment of native candidates to the priesthood. Early on, Don Juan de la FUENTE YEPES already showed his special concern for the development of the native clergy. When YEPES became Bishop of Nueva Segovia, he worked for the training of the native clergy as revealed by an old brochure, which I was telling you a while back, which was found at the Archivo General de Indias in Sevilla, Spain. The document reveals YEPES petition for the establishment of a seminary for Indios in the city of Fernandina of Vigan, which he also asked to be made this new center of his diocese of Nueva Segovia. In 2008, the Archdiocese of Nueva Segovia celebrated the 250th year of the transfer of the seat from Lalo to Vigan. The man to whom we owe the transfer was especially remembered during that year, but unknown to many, the transfer of the seat was not the only objective. He attempted to establish a seminary in the new seat of the Diocese of Nueva Segovia. So in this silver jubilee of the turnover of the seminary, conceived in the mind of Bishop YEPES for the native diocesan clergy, let us retrace the tugot of the development of the native clergy with the hope of awakening our spirit of mission and sense of identity. Let me go to the antecedent. The beginnings of the Filipino diocesan clergy suffered painful birth pangs. It seems that during the first 2 centuries of the Roman Catholic Church in the Philippines, the training of the native clergy was not given importance. Even in front of a crisis that occurred between the friars and the bishops. Because during this time, we can even trace it from the time of Domingo Salazar, the first bishop of the Philippine Islands. There was already a conflict between the diocesan bishop and the friars, because the diocesan bishop would like to assert their authority over the parishes, over the friars, being the parish priests. But the friars said, you don't have the right to assert your authority over us because we have our provincial superior. The Pope has given us a special privilege to do some matters in the celebration of sacraments, etc., not even asking for dispensation because we have the omnibuda. That is the privilege given to religious, that they could be free from getting dispensations from the bishops in terms of needs, in pastoral needs. Actually, because of this, the bishop was asserting his authority. They told him, if you insist on doing a kind of canonical visitation, because the bishops wanted to do canonical visitations, and they don't want the bishop to visit them, I don't know why. Maybe if that happens, the bishop could discover many things in the parishes. Because remember that time, for example, in Nueva Segovia, from Herona to Batangas, there was only one bishop. And he could not see everything that was happening in the parishes. So the friars refused the authority of the bishop or his right in doing canonical visitation. And they threatened the bishops, Your Excellency, if you insist on your right of canonical visitation, we tell you we are going to abandon the parishes. And the bishop could not do anything because, for example, in 1666, with this kind of statistics, there were 250 friars working in the whole islands compared to 60 diocesan Spanish priests. So no choice that the bishop will say, okay, you can go back to the parishes, I'm not going to visit you, I'll just remain in my palacio. So these were some of the things that were happening during the time. And maybe in the mind of most of the bishops, a solution to this is to develop my own clergy. To ordain priests, diocesan priests, who could work with me. But this is always the problem. Every time there is an attempt to do that thing, it was always being hindered by influential people. We go to another reason why they refused to train native clergies. It must have been an effect of the so-called Latin American experience. Because as early as the time of the Conquista in the Latin American region, they already attempted to ordain native priests, the Indios as priests. But, well, the first century of evangelization, it was claimed that the culture of the Indios were not yet purified. For example, in Latin America, in which polygamy is a rampant or is an accepted practice, how could you introduce clerical celibacy? That's why the problem that occurred in the first years of diocesan clergy in Latin America was a failure, because most